Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your video lesson on multiplication equations. And your target is that you can solve multiplication equations. So similar, we're going to be looking at one-step equations using inverse operation. So think, if addition reverses subtraction, what operation will reverse multiplication? Even if you're just thinking of PEMDAS, and we know that these two operations undo each other, we can assume that division will undo multiplication. And we've seen that before when we practiced looking at one-step addition and subtraction equations as well. And when we practiced doing them mentally. So the process of solving a multiplication equation goes along with the division property of equality. Because you need a division to solve a multiplication equation, and that is similar to the properties of equalities for addition and subtraction, where it says that if you divide each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, because you cannot divide by 0, then the two sides remain equal. So again, it's that process of just keeping both sides in check by doing the same thing to either side. Some vocabulary to review that we learned in our powers and order of operations unit is coefficient, which we've talked about a little bit already, is that a coefficient is the number, the numerical factor in a multiplication expression. So when you have a number next to a variable for multiplication, the number in front of the variable is called its coefficient. So for example, what is the coefficient in each of these expressions here? 3 is this first one. -2 is the number in front there. 7. And then here, notice we have a single g, so it's really like there's a 1 there. That's your coefficient. And then a negative sign means that there's a -1 there. So some steps, again, for solving one-step equations. You probably have these written down from your adding and subtracting. Good to just have, again, to remind yourself that you want to rewrite the equation. You want to draw your slide or train tracks to remember that you're keeping both sides equal is the goal. Then you'll use your inverse operation. So we're going to undo the operation done. And then we're going to solve for the variable. Remember, writing a solution is written with the variable equals the number. And then checking your solution is very important to make sure that your what you found actually works and that you didn't make any mistakes. So let's try some multiplication equations. I'm looking at this, and again, reading is really important in math because I can read this first one as 4 times what number is 32, or 4 times what number gives me 32. So in my head, I think I have to undo that. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I divide both sides. And 4 divided by 4 is 1, so I'm left with one single x. 32 divided by 4 is 8. I can check my solution by doing 4 times 8 should be 32. And since that is true, my solution is correct. And remember, I'm not often going to make a mistake in these videos because I want to show you the correct way, but keep in mind that it is possible to make mistakes, and that's why checking your solution is important. So I'm going to do my lines here. Like here might be a place where you make a mistake. So I see a -5 times what number would be 55. So I divide by -5, or maybe some of you forget and you just divide by 5, say. Well, then I might get x equals 11. But if I plug 11 back in, and I check, a negative times a positive is a negative, -55 and 55 are not equal. So that would tell me that I made a mistake, and I should go back and look. Oh, I see that I forgot to do the negative here. That might have triggered me to say positive divided by negative is a negative. Had I plugged that in, my solution would make more sense. So be careful with those. One more, train tracks. Undo multiplying by 3 by dividing by 3. So I get x is equal to negative divided by positive is a negative. 27 divided by 3 is 9. Very important that you know those integer rules, so go back and practice. Check it. 3, positive 3 times a -9 should be a -27. Positive times negative is negative. So since it works, my solution is correct. Try these, come back and check. So you are paused, coming back to try. Train tracks. Undo multiplication with division because any number divided by itself is 1. Negative 6 divided by 6 is 1. I'm left with 1m. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Check it. And it works, so it's true. So remember, it's okay if they're in reverse. If you really want to rewrite this with the variable first, just move everything on either side. You don't have to, but it makes it nice because you do want your variable first in your answer. 8 times what number will give me negative 48? Well, I know a positive times a negative will be a negative, so I assume that. Divide by 8 for 1h. Negative divided by positive. 8 goes into 48 6 times. Check it out. This is really important. This is where you really get to use your math facts as you're practicing multiplying and dividing, which is very good for you. Another one, again, you can rewrite it if you want to. Here I'm going to divide by a negative 18. Negative 18 divided by negative 18 is 1, so I got F. Notice now, negative 18 is not going to go into 6. So I have a fraction here which I want to simplify. So I'm going to rewrite it the other way. So I like that better. And I see that they share a factor of 6. Maybe you see 3. Whichever way, you just got to simplify. So then I see that F is equal to a negative 1/3. You could have left it as negative 6/18 and plugged it in, but that might be a little tricky for you too. So I plug in 6 equals negative 18 times F, which is negative 1/3. Remember multiplying fractions, make them fraction form. Cross cancel if you need to. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 18 6 times. So I have 6 is equal to negative 6 times negative 1, 6. So got a little longer, but still very capable of doing that. One more, train tracks. Divide by 17. Remember, don't just assume it doesn't. Check on your calculator if you need to. 17 goes into 51 3 times. 17 times 3 is 51. So x equals 3 is my solution. So here is a word problem. Mrs. Acosta's car can travel an average of 24 miles on each gallon of gasoline. You are going to write and solve an equation to find how many gallons of gas she will need for a trip of 348 miles. Usually word problems, you got to read it more than once. So we're going to pull out important information. So I see that she is traveling an average of 24 miles on each gallon. So that may look like 24 miles for every gallon. And also that she's planning to travel for this many miles. And what we're wondering is how many gallons. So we can figure out, well, we're really wondering how many times does 24 fit in there into the gallons. So we want to write and solve an equation. So essentially we're thinking, if I'm traveling 24 miles for every gallon, that's a multiplication question, 24 miles for how many gallons is going to let me travel 348 miles. It's one way to do that. So then I really want to figure out, well, how many times does 24 fit in there? And I find out that it's 14 and a half. So she needs 14 and a half gallons to travel 348 miles. So, looking at formula, we're thinking about distance here. So sometimes you need a formula like you use in science. Distance is rate and times time. So this question is talking about a tortoise is one of the slowest land animals, reaching an average top speed of about 1/4 mile per hour. At this speed, how long will it take a tortoise to travel 1.5 miles? So what we're given is a rate, which is our speed, and we're wondering how long, so we're looking for time to travel a certain distance. So what we know, we're being asked to find the time, t, it'll take to travel a distance of that many miles at that rate. So some people will just plug in to the given equation with what they know. So I want to know 1.5 miles is 1/4 mile per hour for how long? Or some people will look for what they're trying to find first. So some people might solve this formula for distance equals rate times time, divide by the rate to make the equation for t, and then plug in what they're given. Because essentially, that's what we're doing when we set it up here to solve for t. Because we're trying to solve for t, we're going to divide to isolate the variable to get it alone. And what we find out is that at that rate, for that distance, it's going to take the tortoise. Sorry, I dropped something. It's going to take the tortoise 6, and what does 6 represent in this case? Well, we saw hours. It's going to take the tortoise 6 hours to travel 1.5 miles. Slowpoke. So that's how you can use a formula to help you solve an equation. I got a little choppy at the end there. Do your best to write down questions. Try some questions. Don't fail when you think it's difficult. Make sure you reread and try again. Check your answers. Use a calculator when you need to. And be your best self. See you soon.